Alright, BobalosRex here, and we got a serious lore rant today, and I don't know how long it's going to take, so let's just get into it. So we're talking the first ones in the cosmic forces, okay? And you're going to see why. Look, it's Slippy. I have a few books to go through, so shout out to the Lore Keeper add-on. I had to get this for sure, since I want to go through a couple of books. The books I'm going to be going through for Rant Exile. We're going to be looking at an expedition report, enemy infiltration for a little bit, the edicts of the Prime Designate. We're going to be looking into the Koresh cosmology, the multiversal energy dynamics. We're also going to be getting into the Arathi books. So when we get into that, we'll go through this. But first, let's talk about our original source of our cosmology chronicles. So, in the chronicles, we hear about the cosmology of the World of Warcraft universe. That we did have one beforehand, but Chronicles is what kind of set everything up. So in Chronicles, you have in the beginning, there's the light and the void. They clashed. All right. Well, actually, in the beginning there was light. Wherever there wasn't light, there was void. So this force can only exist with this other force. Okay. Wow. That's the lore. Then they combine, and that's what started everything. We get order, disorder, life and death. You see life start in our reality. The areas where they bleed together is called the twisting nether. It's not shown here. And then, yeah, all the forces, life sprouts in reality. We get life and death. And then the Titans spring up. And then we get the Titans. And then we find out about demons, right? They find out about demons because life started in reality. We get Titans. Life started in the Twisting Nether. You get demons. That's kind of how it was all explained to us, right? So, light, shadow came together. I'm just going to recap it real quick. Light, shadow came together. Boom. Reality. Okay? Also, the Twisting Nether. Life starts in reality, which means death is there too. Life makes Titans, world souls, walking worlds in reality. The Titans, that's what we were told. And then the demons spawn from the Twisting Nether, that's what we're told. And the conflict over reality begun. And then basically, Chronicles is framed through the eyes of the Titan Keepers, the Titan spawn. And we're basically framed these good, these not so, or these not so good. Okay? It's kind of framed like that, but basically the Titans throughout reality fight back against the demons and the void to protect life, order, and the light helps out, right? So in the Titans, they're like, we fight them. These guys are on our time. We protect life. We're protecting life. And death is just kind of there, all right? That's how that book kind of frames it. I am skipping a lot. There's a lot more to it. But in that, we learn about the Titans. So we learn what the Titans are. There's a Titan Pantheon. There's what's called the Old Gods. But then there's also what's called the Void Lords. Which the Titans do not like. And do not want them to manifest. And in this book, we also kind of get hints of the ways. So these fundamental forces, right? These primal forces. Some of them have a hard time manifesting in reality. Purely. So Shadow has a hard time. We see that with Dementius had to work. Well, really, how hard did he have to work to get into reality? But we'll discuss that more. So, the shadow and the light can't really, basically created reality, according to the Titans, but can't really do much to it, right? Can only send things into it, right? Life is just throughout reality and just all over it. You know, it has its own emerald dream, which we're going to talk about in a bit, and that populates reality, right? So life can affect reality. We see it all over. Death can affect reality. We see it all over. But when we talk about these monopolar elements, we'll get into the other books here. It does get interesting. And then the Titans we see running all over reality. We see the demons from the Twisting Nether running all over reality just fine. So it does mainly seem to be those two forces that have a problem. But then we'll talk about these other two. We're going to be going through a lot of stuff. So that's kind of what Chronicles taught us, right? Now, we have done a lot since we got Chronicles, right? Let's just talk about some places we've been in game. We've been to the Emerald Tree now. We've been to the Shadowlands. We've seen the Titans. We have fought old gods, and now we have fought a Void Lord. We have seen the Eternal Ones, the Titans of the Realm of the Dead, right? We've heard about Elune. We've heard about the Naru, but not so much their keepers. And then as far as the Burning Legion, we know that the demons are bad, and Sargeras then used them. But what's behind them? Who's behind them? So, we thought that was it, right? Then we go to the Shadowlands. And in the Shadowlands, right, we now get a different perspective, right, on the cosmos, right? Because in the Shadowlands, we learn about the first ones, okay? Now, when I'm going to talk about the first ones, I have a theory about the first ones, and it is still a theory because we are working off of what individuals tell us, but I do think these are more reliable narrators than we have seen, especially when we hear about how as the universe was starting, right? Remember how I started Light Void, all that stuff? Well, we get a different picture of it from the view of Denizens of the Shadowlands, which I'm gonna talk about Fareem's notes, right? We're gonna get into the Fareem's notes, but when I talk about it, right? Remember the Titan stuff we just talked about? There are stuff discussed from a representative of the Titans, a Titan Keeper, right? This is an individual acting on their own. Can I say that the Titans wanted it to be done like this? No. Maybe the Titans wanted to explain to their children and their children's children about the first ones and all this stuff. But let's get into it. So in the Shadowlands, I should have kept that up. In the Shadowlands, we meet, and there is a whole book, but I'm not going to discuss the Grimoire because people want to argue with the Grimoire. But it's also mentioned in this. So let's go to Fareem here. So Fareem is one of the best scholars when it comes to the first ones tech, and all that stuff. So, this is the first book by him. I have part 1, there's a part 2, but let's read part 1, and then he actually redoes it in Fareem in Exile. But let's read part 1. Alright, the dawn of all things. Now, this is... So, the brokers in the Koreshi, we are going to talk about ethereal books, Koreshi books, and then we're going to talk about broker books, right? Now, Koreshi and brokers, brokers are Koreshi. right? So they would have had their knowledge from Koresh, right? Now that they were in the Shadowlands, they were going deeper, deeper, deeper. Fareem was getting deeper, deeper, deeper. So he is, in game, he's the #1 scholar on the first one. So these words have the highest merit in my book. So let's go to it. The dawn of all things. There is no small irony that the first specimens of their language remain the most inscrutable. Their language. Alright, who is there? Their language. The first ones. The language of the first ones remain the most inscrutable. Perhaps that is what hindered my progress for so long. Regardless, the particulars are beyond my present ability to decipher. With time, I am certain I will succeed, but not yet. There are references to forces so primal that we have no frame of reference for them. Roiling and churning are measured and deliberate. It's both roiling and churning, and it's measured and deliberate, because we're going to learn soon. The words here have multiple meanings. I must set them aside now, right? Multiple meanings. What is clear is that the great powers took shape. Words have multiple meanings right now. Listen to this. What is clear is that great powers took shape. They took form. How many? There are numbers within numbers, my friend. At first I thought only 2. A slight reference to the light and shadow. At first I only thought there was 2. Until I perceived an infinite array. It was like, oh my god, there's a million. Oh, the terror of it. But as of late, I've settled on 6. Possibly 7. But the last might be an artifact of this geometry. A fractal. We're going to hear about fractals soon. I'll tell you what I know. These 6 forces existed in strife, right? He's calling them forces right now. But we're going to talk about that later, right? Well, not strife in the way one such as you and I would see it. Opposition surely, but whether malignant or benign is unclear. So, the forces were in conflict. We're going to get back to that at the end here. We're going to tie this bow up nice. There was imbalance until there was a need for something more. They, and remember, the first day, he's talking about the first one. He is the #1 studier of first ones when he refers as the royal they, the progenitors, the first ones. They came together or were brought together. And here he's referring to, like, they, the forces, but like the first they would have been the first one, depending on how one interprets the fractal, and gave form to their design. Right? So the 6 forces, the 6 first ones, they came together, right? Because remember, I'm going to talk about, it's going to get into detail about how the first ones and the forces are one and the same. When you talk about the cosmic forces, they are the first ones. They are one and the same. The way I'm going to show you how I get there, right? Forged, scribed, shape. The exact word is elusive. Each architect, again, he's referring to these forces as independent agents acting together, right? The forces, right, the forces are sentient is the way that he's referring to them. He is personifying these forces, okay? Each architect gave a portion of themselves, and thus the pattern was drawn. Right? Could he just be figurative? Could it all be figurative and the forces not be the first ones? We'll see. We'll continue reading. You'll see why I believe what I believe. It is from here that the language becomes clearer. With the framework in place, all that we now comprehend came to be, as if reality were nothing more than a fungus growing on the frame. So the 6 forces, all of them, came together, and then reality. That's how Fareem phrases it, right? Versus the 2, then created these things, and then these 2 came in, and that. No. The way Fareem describes it is these first ones, these progenitors, these things above all, these forces, came together, right? And formed reality. And reality only formed because they came together, and the 6 The six forces now in balance, and from their intersections arose others, a simple structure grown infinitely more complex. So now it's showing more that instead of just the six together, right? We have these six coming together to form reality. The six forces combination reality is at the center, right? But there's other lines, there's other fractals, right? Of these forces. They create multiple intersections, right? And we're going to talk about the multiple intersections when I pull up my chart. Okay? And then that's why, and then he's like, now do you understand why my translations took so much time? They still elude me. Alright. With, as each emptiness abated and grew fuller, the pattern alone was not enough. Shapes arose within shapes, begotten by the six to beget more. Now it goes clearer, more certain, each layer more fathomable to a meager mind such as yours. Six realms, many intersections, countless fractals in balance? Possibly, but that might be wrong. If 6 equals 1, then what is the other? The one outside the pattern. Okay? So, I'm going to talk about the forces, but it's basically, the way he's putting it in his beginning, it's the 6 forces, right, exist. You have these monopolar, right, I'm saying it again, we're going to get back to why I use that, forces existing, and then they have this framework, right? They have these things connecting them. At the center, we have reality, but there's all these other intersections, right? They didn't just connect in this one spot. All 6 didn't just connect in this one spot. There is this one spot where all 6 connected, reality, but then there's other spots where 2 connect, these 2 connect, those 2 connect, those 2, these 2, those 2. Okay, we're going to talk about that more. So now let's get Farim in Exile proper. Oh, that's the epilogue when you start part 1. Alright, so he's talking about his exile. As my exile begins, I cannot help but think back on the events that led to our arrival. They doubted me, mocked me, conspired to replace me, yet as they unsheathed their blades of doubt and skulked forward to strike me down, it happened. Right? The geometry revealed itself. The fractals align. At long last, I found my way to Zereth Mortis. If you remember what kind of... You should be doing it when we do Tazavesh and whatnot, but you see how the first one tech has these like shapes appear and stuff? That's kind of like what the fractal magic effect is. Okay, so he revealed his way into Zereth Mortis. Now, this is when we start getting into Zereth Mortis lore. Now, some people... well, it's hard to understand what Zereth Mortis is in the first one. So, we do have a direct connection between the first ones, whether or not they are a cosmic force or not, and the Zereth Mortis. In Zereth, these meanings is basically keystone, right? These are keystone places, right? Zereth Mortis in this, keystone of death, right? That basically hold up reality, right? We are going to talk about this other book that doesn't have as good of a view, but almost sees it. But there's these keystones, these Zereths, all over the cosmos. There's a Zereth Mortis, Zereth Lumen. We see hints of that in messages from others, right? There are texts from when we do the Oracle quest in Zereth Mortis. Here's a quote. Mortis, Lumen, Ordos, rhythm and structure, Vitae, Umbra, Tumult, improvisation and possibility, balance is truth. Okay? So, these keystones, he's found a way in. And that's what I'm talking about. This guy, Fareem, this broker, is the leading expert on this because he is in, right? He has mastered death. Is he in this death bias? Yes, but I'm going to show you later why death seems to be more honest in how it wants to talk to us about the first ones. So, the fractals align. He found his way into Zereth Mortis. No other mind can conceive the formula required to succeed. Portal after portal, tuned and retuned, stretching out and looming back upon themselves. No wonder so many before me have failed. The fools among our expeditions route. Okay, so he's talking about that. Did I not insist that the first ones would not leave their secrets unguarded? Again, we're talking about these first ones now. Alright, so they found Haven. Alright, I'm trying to skip some of the stuff here. Now we're in part 2. The deeper we delved into the mysteries of Zereth Mortis, the more my colleagues became affected. Even Executor Al-Karef, perhaps the most glory-driven of anyone in the expedition, began to regard the knowledge we gleaned as sacred. In time, Alara and others perceived the great truth. We could not send words of our discovery back to the overseer. The secrets of the first one were not to be plundered. Outsiders would only disrupt the crucial purpose of Zereth Mortals. We shattered our portals. I blotted out my translocation equations, even from my own mind. Any temptation that might lead us back to the outer realms or forfeit. Our hearts sang as we renounced our cartel designations. From that day forth, I was simply Fareem, and while I did not seek to profit from progenitor's knowledge, I did want to understand it. That's where the schism began. Alright, so now we're going to get more through his notes. We're getting less cosmic, which is why I'm trying to skip over this, and more into the interplay. So basically, in the next one, they don't want him to do research. They are just like, hey, let's just protect this. They said him doing more is heretical, and then that started a feud, even though he gave them that. Still, I bore this indignity in a manner befitting one of my intellect and resolve. In exile, I would outpace them all, and so I did. So you can see these, right? He's not getting into cosmic stuff there, right? He just, as he neared the translation, but he doesn't go back to that also. Okay, so now we're getting back into more of the meat. Though access to the sepulchre continued to elude me, I learned much by observing the Atoma. Now, the Atoma are direct creations of the first ones, right? Let's pull up, wrong button. Let's pull up what we're talking about. So in Shadowlands, we actually fight a lot of these critters, right? So Guardian of the first ones. This is an Atoma, right? That's an Atoma, right? These Vigilant Guardians Atoma, they're bigger than the normal ones, but basically these are direct creations of the first ones. Is it the first one of death that makes stuff like this? Are we gonna see other first ones have a little different design? Are all Zereths gonna kind of mimic this design but maybe be a little different? But these that's not a broke. These are Atoma. That one's corrupted. And then we look here in the raid, right? We see these prototypes for what would become Eternal ones, which would mean we could see Titan ones. But that's too deep. Let's get back to this. So he's deep, right? Atoma go a long way, but there's even more. Admittedly, I underestimated them at first. They seemed mere servitors, less capable of independent thought than even the muddled-minded attendants in Oribos. But like everything else in Zereth Mortis, they were part of a pattern. A geometry that shifted, expanding and contracting as demanded by the duty put before them. After all, this land is no museum, no library of obscurities. No, it is a workshop, a forge where afterlives are fashioned. Now, if you remember Zereth Mortis, there was the big machine. Zereth Mortis the machine. There's the sepulchre. And then, yeah, there's Zereth Mortis, the keystone of the Shadowlands, the keystone of death that creates the afterlives we saw. It created Ardenweald. It created Revendreth. It created or Ouroboros is a part of the machine. It created the Maw. It created all these realms of the Shadowlands from Zereth Mortis, from that afterlife machine. And we see what I just showed you, where they manufacture the Eternal ones that we'd see. The Primus. This is Prototype Primus. Prototype Carestia. Prototype Winter Queen. We actually see it. So there is no question that the first ones just be printing up afterlives, right? Or the first one of death, right? Because remember, we're talking about a force here. Like, this kind of mimics, because they made the Atoma, right? So if the first ones were people walking around, doing stuff, doing their thing, right? Then we could see them as that. But no, they're creating the Atoma, these machines, to run their machines. We see that exact same thing with the Titans operating on Azeroth. So these first ones make the Zereth and then have their little critters run it. So they're not individuals walking around. Again, to me, that shows more evidence that the first one and a cosmic force are intertwined. The cosmic force of death created Zereth Mortis, created Ouroboros, created that, and then that began printing the Zereth. I think the Zereth came first. That started printing afterlives. Then Ouroboros, which is almost like a tube to send the souls full of anima into the machine of death. Zereth Mortis, the main factory of that machine. And then when that gets enough anima, prints out more afterlives, right? So we see that directly. Okay. When I detached my consciousness from the limitations of perception, I saw the grand architecture of the progenitors put into place. Progenitors, first ones. Afterlives assembled according to the needs of the Arbiter's judgment. Arbiter, also created by the progenitors. It was the Atoma who carried out these duties, forging flora, fauna, and terrain, encasing them in orbs to be sent out into the in-between like seeds falling into fertile soil. So, Zereth Mortis is at this, like, nexus of the Shadowlands, right? But I wouldn't even say next. It's like beyond. It's almost outside, right? And then it sends afterlives into the in-between. The in-between in the Shadowlands is basically the Great Dark Beyond in our reality, right? We're going to talk about these phases as we get into another book. Do you understand as I do? Everything about the Shadowlands, everything is part of a pattern. A closed system which nothing is lost, even that which is seemingly destroyed is merely being reshaped for a new purpose. Right? So all of this is basically all of the leftover Shadowlands, the death energy funnels into Zereth Mortis, is tied back up and reprinted, right? No loss, no energy loss here. Purpose. Myopic though they are, perhaps the attendants understand some small measure of this mystery. Now he's referencing the attendants in Ouroboros. Again, seemingly made by a first one. To run that system, right? Which is more directly in the Shadowlands, right? The Atoma working in Zereth Mortis, more classical first ones, and Ouroboros still kind of old looking, have a little bit more high-tech robots running it. Because they're going to be in the realm doing this stuff. So that's kind of interesting. Alright, Farim in Exile. I observed many type of Atoma of varied sizes and shapes, guardians, builders, collectors, and a more petite variety that seemed to revel in duty of upkeep and repair. Right? So, guardians, builders, collectors, all the Atoma. Besides an unwavering devotion to their obligations, these Atoma shared another notable trait, their language. They spoke not in words I could understand, but tones and echoes. Remember that when I talked about that other quote, when I talked about Mortis, Lumen, Ordos, rhythm, and structure, compared to the other one, I wonder if that will come into play with how Like, are Atoma going to be in all the Zereth, or is it different depending on what cosmic power made it? That is really one of the questions I have, but let's continue. Know that I, Fareem, am renowned for my linguistic skills, though arrival in the Shadowlands imbues mortal souls with knowledge of the words of death. Many retain memories of the language they use on their worlds. And what is language if not a system of sounds and patterns, I ask you? So yes, of course I have absorbed countless languages during my interviews of mortal souls, thus you understand my confidence that the language of the Atoma would pose little challenge. Never in my existence have I been so wrong. The language of the Atoma was not merely words, no, it was part and parcel of the ciphers. The words themselves were keys to understanding the geometry, the fractals. There is so much wanting to be discovered, but it was when I encountered one of the rarest forms of Atoma, my mind was truly opened. A quote I have from one of the rarest Atoma, that one. Atoma were commonplace in Zereth Mortis, but not all types. One was extremely rare, like polished jewels among infinite grains of sand, the oracles. They sang songs to their kin, and so at first I thought they were unique only in appearance. But as I drew close to one to better observe its duty, something unexpected happened. I heard its voice. And yet the term voice falls short. To be sure, I experienced the sensation of words being spoken in a much the manner one does when conversing with a colleague, and yet it was more. I felt the words as much as I heard them. The thoughts entered my consciousness and conveyed their meaning. When we did Shadowlands, if you do Zereth Mortis questline, you have an oracle speak to you too. And you have all that. What words did it offer? It spoke images, riddles, prophecies, as they reverberated through my very core. I remember my conversations were here too, and the thousand truth they told of me of. Then it struck me, the oracle spoke in both one truth and 1,000. Very interesting that this has 1,000 truths, and that's similar to something else. When it struck me, the oracle spoke in both one truth and 1,000, not as separate thoughts, but as one in the same instance. So death hit both, right? Light is a one truth system, void is 1,000 truths. Meanwhile, death over here, or the oracle, 1 in 1,000. All right, interesting. And if the oracle entities left behind to oversee a workshop could think in such terms, how much more complex must the mind of their maker be? Long have I scoffed at what I learned of Titans, or the Void Lords, or demons of the Nether. I held Death's pantheon in higher regard. Right? So even he's like, yo, I was biased to Death, since we've been traveling through, brokers, being like, damn, this place is good. Because remember, they lived in reality. They knew about the Void Lords. They knew about the Titans. They knew about the demons. But then when they went to the Shadowlands, they're like, damn, I guess this is the end, right? Because they would have seen how much Void fears death, even though death isn't the bottom level of energy, which we'll talk about that there. That seems to be like some kind of bottom, right? Okay. But now I know that they are just as limited. Truth lies not in one direction or another, but their intersections. The intersections of power. Truth lies at the intersections of power. And what's at the intersection? All the powers, reality. The first ones have parceled out their gifts, but gave no child all of them. Okay? The first ones parceled out their gifts, but gave no child all of them. No wonder these offsprings bickered with such incessant jealousy. Their very nature was one of denial. At this realization, I lost consciousness, for I had once again transcended to a new plane of thought. Let's go. Part 7. Every new discovery in Zereth Mortis drew me back to the mysteries of the first ones. I sought to understand their nature, yet each time I believed I was nearing an answer, I found myself drifting further away. I considered again their design, the pattern, lines, curves, angles, curves, the turns, so many turns. All the different forces, all coming together, the afterlives, Zereth Mortis, these fractals, because he's like doing the magic. He's doing the first one magic. He's looking at it. the 6 forces that pointed towards a 7th and yet denied it. We're going to get into this because so we have the 6 together, and then it has a mirror, a 7th. Is the 7th have 6 different ones? Do we even know? But we know the 6 are at conflict with a 7th. Alright? Which is interesting. For a long while, I considered these seemingly contradictions no more than another variable, an unknown waiting to be solved. But the song of the oracle continued to reverberate in my consciousness, and as I allowed my focus to soften, my grip upon the tangible to loosen, and its geometry took shape in my mind. It was both 6 and 7. The 6 were one, and the 7th the other. Did they desire union? The song seemed to say otherwise. Both were, yet only one could be. A melody shifted. I shuddered at the shape it took. It was not a variable to be solved, it was a solution waiting its opportunity. The song must not be allowed to end. So now it seems, right? 6 together is existence, reality, and the 7th is nothingness, non-reality. That seems to be the hint here. Alright, and then he says, the song must not be allowed to end. Do the first ones still sing it? Truly I do not know, but if they do not, then if they do not, who will? Who will sing the song? Alright, now we're almost done with For Reem in Exile. This is the epilogue, and then we can talk about some other interpretations. Though the jailer has been defeated and the Shadowlands made whole again, I find myself unable to celebrate these victories. For I have studied the inner workings of the Sepulchre, seen the powers with which the jailer sought to remake reality, and these observations fill me with the fear that shakes the very core of my being. It is clear to me now that there must be a Zereth for each force of the cosmos, and within them an inner sanctum akin to the Sepulchre. And if that is true, then these sanctums must be connected on some fundamental level, a connection the jailer sought to exploit. Azeroth. What he began in the Sepulchre was meant to cascade outward from one Zereth to the next. Alright, so all these Zereths, all these keystones are connected through a point. It really does seem to be like Azeroth is that point, that prime world soul, that point. He found the connecting point, a prime world soul with all the forces? Is that the point? Is that what reality was built to create? Did the first ones, that's what I'm getting to, did the first ones, right, build all of these points, built this framework with Azeroth at the center, right? For what reason? That's the question. And that, again, we go back to the 6 versus the 7, and the song will not end. What song is playing right now? The Radiant song. We can't let the Radiant song end. I see the connections, but let's continue. When he began in the Sepulchre was meant to cascade outward from one Zereth to the next until all were dominated by his power. The heart of the Shadowlands acted as a doorway to the heart of each cosmic force in turn, one after another, bound to his will. But if his scheme was thwarted, then why is my mind so ill at ease? Because I have seen how fragile the pattern is, how delicate the scales that keep the 6 forces in balance. And if the jailer, in his act of malevolence, left behind but the most imperceptible of cracks in the pattern, then I fear what is tiny now will only grow until the balance itself is prone to be shattered by another force applying relentless pressure. I pray that the first ones anticipated such an eventuality, that they would leave measures in place to preserve their grand design unless their design was never meant to endure, and that is the possibility that haunts me. So, let's look at this both ways. Okay, if we're first ones, cosmic forces, the 6 versus the 7, alright. The first ones, let's say they made a deal with the seventh. Like, hey, we'll have our time. Okay, we'll have our time. We'll build our things, have our stuff, have our time. Then you can have it. This thing will hold you off. That's kind of what it's looking like. Like it could be a door, a gateway, something. Will hold you off the seventh for a time. And then when this is done, when what we've done is done, right? Inevitability, you will be released. You will be free to take over and you will reign supreme. But also, I think the first ones, when building this, knew that they, the six, were not powerful enough to beat the seventh, right? But they knew that if they started what I think their flaw, they made a flaw to start this conflict, right? These conflict of forces. Because they thought, right? Together, we are shown to hold off them, but it's hard for us to stay together. We aren't permanent. But if we create something that can keep this going, that can be more powerful than we were ever, that can fight whatever this seventh thing is. That seems to be what I think they're going for, right? With this. Now, you may be saying, okay, why should I believe the Shadowlands first one's nonsense when Odin and the Titans told me otherwise? Well, let's talk about Odin specifically, not just the Titans. I can't say the Titans are liars. Well, I can, but we're just talking about Odin, the Keeper, right? Because, again, we talk about Fareem, he mentioned Boy Lords, all that. So now we have this somewhat newer model, okay, of the cosmos forming, right? So we have the six forces. Each force, if they had a first one, right, which is what I'm saying, right, or first ones, right, the first ones made what I'm calling second ones, right, the second ones. Titans, Void Lords, Light Lords, the Eternal Ones in the Pantheon of Death, whatever the living ones would be in the life one, and then the Fell Lords, right? Fell Titans, right? Which they, in my opinion, maybe they all didn't have kids, maybe one just had a bunch, maybe it's not just cut and dry, but I do feel like that one statement, where was it? Is it in part 5? Oh no, it's 4, I guess. 3. When he talks about the Eternal Ones and the Void Lords and all that, so we kind of get a hint. Which one was it? Was it early? I mean, I just read it, so yeah, basically it's like who is right, who's wrong. So we have this, whatever the first ones made, they had children, right? And that's the thing Fareem starts with here. He's like, the first ones existed and created the Zereths. The first ones gifted their children with knowledge, but not everything. That's what Fareem gets at, right? And remember, he has studied this the most, right? So anyone else is working with less knowledge than him. Does he have everything? No. And that's the thing. He still doesn't even have anything. But from his theories, let's pull this all together now. So from his theories, I believe, and I agree with him, that the first ones and the cosmic forces are one. If we go to the expedition report that people want to use, what is clear, the great powers took shape. The six forces existed in strife. Well, not in strife in one would seek. Opposition surely, but whether malignant or benign is unclear. There was an imbalance until there was a need for something more. They came together. Okay, they, his progenitors, the first ones, that's always been what he's talking about. They came together and gave form to their design, forge, scribe, shape, the exact words elusive. Each architect, the first one, the progenitor, gave a portion of themselves and dubbed the pattern and draw. So, That is where I get that. First ones are cosmic forces. The Zareth machines hold up. Like, we see Zareth Mortis creating afterlives. So we know the Zareths create reality together. All the Zareths together hold up reality. Okay? The first ones had children. We learned that they gifted their children with knowledge, but not everything. Right? And that's a flaw, or in Fareem's ways. That could be a flaw. Why did they do that? Alright? We also learned that there's an outside force. The forces were at conflict, but these 6 came together and created reality. And in these intersections, all the other myriad of forces come together, right? Through all these intersections, because everything connects. All the forces connect with each other. Okay. Now, let's bring back up Odin. Okay, remember my Titan stories and why I want to say that we know that we weren't told everything and those are inherently flawed? Well, let's roll back. So, this is Edicts of the Prime Designate, book found in Old Dominion. You can get it yourself. All historical so this is, let's just start from the top. Keepers, it has been brought to my attention that as of late, many of you have become fascinated by the emergence of mortal beings. That is, creatures born of flesh, rather than crafted of stone and steel like our loyal Titan Forged. While my initial impulse was to eradicate these aberrations before they evolved further, I now believe they may prove useful if properly controlled. Yet even as we guide their development according to the edicts of the Titans, we must always remember that mortal minds are destined to be small and incapable of complex understanding. Therefore, as your Prime Designate, I must establish a few minor but necessary regulations to govern your interaction with these nascent beings. First, all historical records documenting the advancements of the Black Empire to be purged. Alright, this is Odin, not Titans. Remember, Odin, not Titans. Paint the age as one of chaos and misery, a pernicious blight that we keepers eradicated with the old gods locked in confinement. There should be no evidence available to contradict our assertions. Surely, if you care for these mortals, you would not wish to see them led astray into darkness. So, Chronicles, boom, big hit. Black Empire, biased. We already knew it, though. We already knew it. Already knew it, right? We can glean some info. You know, we'll see what the Titans were thinking. But we definitely want to hear from another side sometimes. But now let's see second. Attribute all accomplishments and works of wonder to the Titans alone. Despite the relentless arguments made by some of you, this is not fallacy. After all, can anything truly be said to exist until it's been ordered? Of course not. Therefore, it is irrefutable that the Titans are the source of all creation. FYI, this ordered/created thing is mentioned in the enemy preface. So, all these books play off each other. Third, do not share knowledge of the first ones. Mortals could not conceive of the wonders that the makers granted to the Titans in Zareth Mortis. There it is. Right? There it is. Locked in. Our original Chronicles lore. Now we gotta look straight to Fareem, because he was already on to the other Zareths, right? Him, in the Shadowlands alone, a mortal that was unmortaled into the Shadowlands, studying, found a way into a Zareth, even though people like this want to keep him out. Even the Eternal Ones were like, yo, we can't go back there. It's not allowed. Unpermitted. Right? I can't... The Primus was like, yo, I'm not allowed to see my 3D printed copy and be like, damn, what the fuck? That ain't no. I'm not going back. I'm not going there. We're not going there, okay? He found in. And this confirms that there's Zereth Ortis. So, Fareem had his theory that there were other Zereths in Dragonflight. We confirmed another Zereth. Right there. Odin says, shut up. It don't exist. Thus learning the progenitors, again a reference to the first ones, the progenitors, would only confuse them. It is enough that mortals know the Titans brought order to the cosmos and that they are owed deference. While some among you would prefer to argue these points further, such debate can no longer be tolerated. Again, we see Titan Keepers disagreeing with him, but they're like, he's the boss, he gotta make the rules. I remind you that I speak with the authority of the Titans, and any further dissent may cause me to question whether you have succumbed to outside influence. Remember, life is chaos and must be controlled. Your leader, Prime Designate, Odin. Alright, so we know his deal, right? I just wanted to bring this up to show you that a lot of Fareem's assertions get confirmed in a statement by Odin, right? So, Chronicles has its place, and I love the book as its own because it gives us so much other lore and stories. But as a cosmic story, we have now have our expert to look to, which is always what I want to defer to when I talk about first one stuff. So, let's talk about more cosmology, because in this one, right, the one I just referencing is enemy infiltration preface. So in this is a Dreadlord talking to Denathrius, right? An eternal one for the cosmic force of death. He basically goes through each of the cosmic forces and sums up their weaknesses. And if you remember, right, when we talked about the first ones and their gifts, right? Odin mentioned that the first ones gave him a gift, right? Could not see the wonders the makers granted the Titans and Ordos. Which Titans were in Zereth Ordos? Right? Which ones grew as world souls? Were they grown as world souls, then moved to Zereth Ordos? Are they grown and then sent out, right? We could look to the afterlives, right? So maybe an eternal one is put in a little planet in an afterlife seed and sent out, and then they grow and we get like a winter queen, right? I don't think that's the way for the big dogs, right? I think the big ones, right, that are printed from whatever Zereth Ordos is, maybe that is how they are. I think it's different for each one, but we can maybe imagine Zereth Ordos being the printer of Titans, right? Or at least making the big ones, right? But it is very interesting because when you look at Zereth Ordos, if reality is the Titan realm, which it may not be the case now, we do have to rethink what a world soul is, right? If it is a Titan, right? Which Titan came from worlds, and which Titans were made in Zereth Ordos? Okay, that is the questions. Because we are told world souls become Titans, but maybe that is not the case, especially since we see Zereth Ordos mentioned. We know how Zereth Mortis works. Which Titans were created? Which ones were made from world souls? That's the question, right? So, let's get back to this book. In many ways, so we're talking about goals, gifts, and what they weren't told, what their weakness. So we're talking about weaknesses here. In many ways, the Titans will be the easiest to manipulate. Their singular goal is to impose structure upon everything we see. So we know their goal. That's great. We got their goal. Impose structure upon everything you see. The progenitor of order, the first one of order, said, order that shit. Alright? And the Titans were like, bet. Show them a force that opposes their drive for order, and they will be consumed by the urge to eradicate Their weakness. The first one of order was like, order everything. And you have OCD. Ah! Everything's got to be in its place. Everything's got to be in its place. That's the tight. That's it. They're like, everything. Amanthul's like, yo, it's got to be in its place. Amanthul is looking at something and it's like slightly off. He's like, no. That tree, you didn't plant a tree symmetrically on the other side. Pull it out. That's it. That's the gift. Show them a force that their pantheon is seemingly united in purpose, is vulnerable to fracturing. Alright, oh. He clocked that right. The Void Lords all but welcome us with open arms. They are so preoccupied with their 1,000 truths that they ignore the lies we sow in their very midst. I believe that we can leverage their vast reach to position them as a foil against our other rivals. Death 100% did that, right? Titans can care less about death. Light says Void's the worst. And life? Well, we're going to see how they feel about life. But they did do that for Void. We remain wary, though. Since they are observant of multiple outcomes, it's conceivable that they could anticipate our coming. Now, this with the weird Xalatath fake thing is very interesting because if Xalatath did see, if the Xalatath ending in the Maw taking over the jailer thing is true, that could mean that they saw it coming and goofed him? Like, maybe. 1,000 truths. One of them was like, yo, Death's gonna win. Because they shady as fuck. Like, we're literally Void, and their place is the Shadowlands. What? Like, they are shady. Let's keep an eye on them. Similar to the Titans, the Naru, and their keepers. To me, this is the first mention of what's above the Naru, right? And my big hope for that is like, because let's look at the Eternal Ones and look at the Titans. The Titans are pretty varied, right? The Titans are pretty varied. And are Lifey, Khaz'goroth, Fiery, Amanthul, you know, he's blue and timey-wimey, Norganon blue. But they do have their different style. They are pretty blue. Except for a few. But they a little different, right? We look at the Eternal Ones, they extremely different compared, right? The variety of Eternal Ones, the variety in the Eternal Ones and the variety in the Titan Pantheon is very noticeable. But, I mean, Order, you can see why they want to make things look neat and tidy. Shadowlands, they do like ordery stuff, but they're more freeform compared to Order. What would the Naru Keepers look like? And we know Elune is the Winter Queen's sister. I have an idea of what Elune looks like, but the Pantheon of Life could look. There could be plant ones, this ones, that one, mushroom ones, who knows? Right? And that's what I'm getting at, right? We see members. Dementius is a Void Lord, right? Naru have keepers. What are these different second ones looking like? And there's many we haven't seen, and I can't wait to see more. Honestly, I can't wait to see more, and I hope we see more. I expect we'll see more because it's a big universe, right? But they're singular in purpose. Their adherence to let's get back to this. So their adherence to a linear path is an obvious shortcoming. They savor nothing more than being proved right. So if they believe they have converted one of their precious light, they will trust that agent implicitly. All right, light's weakness, trust. Or that's what they say it as. But I like that we see what the gifts the progenitors gave, and then the truths they didn't give, right? And again, I think that plays into this idea of the first ones wanted this flaw so that the forces conflicted, and we get these different forces. And we get this conflict so that the forces could power up to go against the one. The adherents to life are the most insidious. Of course, Death would say that. Opponents, perhaps because of their nature so antithetical to our own. Still, we learn much from observing the link between their plane and Ardenworld, and we have a high confidence that the vulnerability has been identified. Our operative has already gained the trust of our target. Now, this is going to be huge, right? But this is to do with Ardenworld and a link between it. So it's like, did this already come to play? Not really, but we'll have to see. And as previously discussed, our position within the plane of disorder is proceeding flawlessly. Consuming fell energy is not a pleasant process, but a necessary one. The deception you have architected will bear fruit in ages to come. Part of me... Dude, Denathrius has to be teaming up with the Lords of Disorder, right? The Pantheon of Disorder. We gotta see him run up on that Pantheon and be like, yo, I'm in, right? I got kicked out of my side. Y'all want me? Send me enchant. Let's go. Because we have no idea what is going on with Disorder. Did their Pantheon basically kill themselves? Like, fight too much and they eradicated themselves? Like, what is the Pantheon of Disorder doing? Like, that is crazy. We don't know. Don't even have a hint. Because Sargeras hijacked them. But I am curious about if the infiltration that this is talking about isn't the Sargeras one. But makes me think maybe Varmothras, right? All the torture, right? All the torture that Homeboy here was going through was to get him into the true realm of disorder. That is what I'm wondering. Because they talk about consuming fell energy. They're like, the operative we have doing this is not going to be happy. Alright, he's being sent to the Fell Realm, right? We'll have to see. We'll have to see if he comes back. Alright, and then, as ever, we shall serve as your unseen hand. Okay, so, that's theirs. Now, I kind of got to start speeding this up here. So, let's get to the Arathi. So the Arathi come in really good, right? Dropping some really good knowledge here. They talk about singular energy types are unstable in our reality, which actually does kind of seem to bear fruit, right? You look at pure order magic, we only see very few applications of pure order. We see it in the Oathbinder. Norse Darmu mentions order magic in the Legacies cinematic, being in the Oathbinder, what controlling the Drakdir. So we do see order magic directly mentioned, but again, since it's unstable, it binds with something, right? And order manifests a lot as arcane, which to me means order magic, pure order magic, binds with the mana in the air itself, time, whatever element is near order magic, pure order magic, immediately binds with it. But that basis is order magic. That's what I believe it is. That is just my theory, though. But singular energy types, here's where it's mentioned here. Singular energy types are unstable according to Ogden's law, and thus they bind to one or more secondary elements. Secondary elements. So we have the monopolar elements. Here, let's talk about this. Put simply, the cosmos appears as a hexateron. Imagine a four-sided to form a multi-dimensional solid with 20 planes of existence, 20 planes of existence, 15 transitory paths. I think the transitory paths are what he's calling secondary elements, and 6 vertices where interferon patterns create monopolar expressions of cosmic forces. Welcome to bro, Palwatar. You need to meet for Rim, bro, because you're getting close, but you need to get behind the scenes. There's stuff behind the scenes that you're not being shown. Okay, but monopolar expressions. The pure forces, they're unstable in our reality. We kind of see that with the light and void, right? Death magic, you don't see pure death magic. It's usually dabbling with other stuff. Pure life magic is usually combining. Disorder and order, again, fell, right? You don't see disorder magic. It's just the second it appears, it's destructive fell magic, right? It's just, we see it as fell. Okay? We don't see the pure disorder. I wouldn't even know what that looked like. Maybe that's the red, like Hellfire's pure disorder. But it's interesting, right? It's very interesting when it comes to this. So the 20 planes of existence, we do learn about multiversal planes from ethereals, which have a lot more ability to traverse these planes than the Arathi have, in my opinion. And then he drops this. So now let's get to the multiversal energy. There it is. Technomancer Ometerion. Okay, so what do we learn from this book? Alright, the Mermatian paradox, this is like a flocking paradox. This is basically stuff can randomly change depending on what's going on. Is kind of what that's accommodating for. But this is what I want to get to. Energy transfer within the cosmos occurs as natural process, governed by constant absorption and loss of energy. Each plane of existence absorbs and radiates energy, maintaining a balance that defines its state. Higher energy planes. Again, we have the Arathi book talking about 20 planes of existence. Now we're talking about planes here, and now we're getting an order, okay? Higher energy planes such as light, fire, air, spirit, and the twisting nether exist in a state of abundant energy. Traveling to these planes require an addition of vast amounts of energy to the vector of any untethered soul. However, since stochastic modeling indicates that such events are more likely to occur due to energy loss from environmental friction, the general plot of such stable transitions is downwards toward death, decay, earth, water, and ultimately void. The great dark beyond exists at the center, serving as an erotic nexus of all cosmic forces. Fortunately, untethered space is a recurrent state that prevents the soul from falling further down into energy negative planes of existence. So, under untethered space is the catch-all, right? So, all the forces have energy, right? I'm finally bringing up my chart here. We're going to talk about my chart here. Let's bring it up. Are y'all ready for this? Boom! Alright, we're now moving into Bob theory. Alright, I'm going to go through this whole notepad here. Each plane absorbs and radiates energy, maintaining a balance that defines its state. The great dark is the nexus of all cosmic forces. Even the void has energy, and untethered space exists to catch souls before they enter energy nether space. So, let's go to the chart. Here's my chart. So here's the void, right? Here is... Wait, why can't I slide over? Oh no, I guess it cut off. Here's the picture. So light, imagine lights over here. Right, lights over here. You can barely see it, but imagine lights is over here. So light. Yeah, I guess I just cut it off on accident. Okay, so lights over there. So we got light, fire, all this. So void, untethered space, right? So this is 0. All the way from whatever void it starts at to this This is 0. You can't go here. Alright? Apparently. Okay, what's beyond there? Who knows? Okay? We're gonna get to bomb theory. So these are the forces, right? This is that kind of diagram, right? And then there's a Zareth, a cornerstone in each force, right? And then these lines are the secondary elements. So I have like fire here, decay, water. So these are the combinations. Anima. I'm just making up stuff for most of these, other than the main 6. But yeah, so we have these combinations of elements here, right? So this, I think, is Azeroth. I think the first ones made the machine and put Azeroth at the center, the prime world soul, and all the other forces are competing for it, right? All these other forces, because that's kind of what they were told. They were like, go onto the cosmos and order stuff, spread life, bring faith, or keep to the true timeline, in this case, of light. Alright, keep to the true timeline. Bring disorder, bring conflict. Like, this one is basically bring conflict. This one's bring order. This one's manage death, right? Spread life. And then this is spread the 1,000 truths. Oh, you can't see. That part's cut off. So that's spread the 1,000 truths. Right? Oh, see, that's why. There we go. Actually, we'll just make it really big. Alright, I don't usually use paint. So, 1,000 truths, 1,000 truths that we see mentioned everywhere. So this one's manage death. Manage. I spelled that wrong. This one is, that should be a, oh my god, now it's getting worse. Manage. Order. We already know. See, they're very easy. And this one's like bring light. Okay, so yeah, we got it, right. They combine the secondary elements. But that's the problem with what I see here is, so we have this 7th force over here, which is like nothingness, oblivion. Is reality a cage, a door, a lock? Is it the multiverse? What's up with time, right? We'll get to my theory in a second. Then we have the energy levels here, right? Light, fire, air, spirit, twisting nether, great dark beyond, death, decay, earth, water, void. Aluneth mentions an arcane realm. So we do know there is like an arcane dimension here. And then what's interesting with the new Harnir stuff is the Emerald Dream a different one? The Harander is connected to the Rift of Arm, which we know connects to the Twisting Nether and the Great Dark Beyond, which is very interesting to see a big connection there, right? This, I just put in all these other realms. So Skyhold, Helheim, their realms, are they on this 20 realm list? And then this is basically all the places we've been. So we exist in the Great Dark Beyond. We've been there. We are going there. We've been to the Emerald Dream. We've been to Nyalotha. We've seen the Emerald Nightmare. We've been to the Shadowlands. We're going to the Void Storm. We've even been to Zareth Mortis. We've been all over the place. And then over here, this is also cut off. So those are eternal ones, right? We know them. We got the Titans. And then others that have been mentioned here. Here, let me move myself real quick. So, Alun, we see associated with life. Anshe, is that light? What's up with them? And who are the Lords of Chaos? And then, here's the thing. So, Dimensius is a Void Lord, right? We know the Narus have a Keeper, Light Lords, whatever. If we ever purify Dimensius, would he turn into a Light Lord? Does that how it works? We see Naru phase shift. But do Light Lords and Void Lords work that way? That would be crazy, right? But could we see Light Mencius. Like, what? But then that makes me wonder, like, Dimensius didn't make the old gods. If there's pantheons, right? So the pantheon of Void Lords, right? So you could have Dimensius is the Eater. Basically Cthulhu, like, not what's the big one? The big giant one, Void Lord, maybe be the old god Void Lord, and then there be a couple of other Void Lords or something, you know, so we can have a couple of them. And then we get to, let's get to my theories so we can end this here. So, Bob theory. I agree with Fareem. I think the first ones equal the cosmic forces. Is that confirmed? No, but I trust Fareem. Okay? That's my opinion. Okay? Disagree or not. That's what I'm working for, right? That is my thought. I think there is a seventh force, progenitor, something out there that may be a combination of its own at this point. Could be. But that could be a big deal. Alright? That could be our next big, mega big bad. Or just an existential crisis. Right? The 6 combined to match the 7th. Alright? I agree with that. All the forces of second ones, aka Titans, all that, are flawed, but gifted, and have a gift that we need, and a flaw to overcome. Okay? I think the first ones created flaws to cause strife and conflict, but also to better them. Because here's the thing, right? You give people all these gifts, maybe the gifts came with a weakness, right? The gift will only be better when you overcome the weakness, right? If you had no weaknesses, you can't really better yourself. But to have a weakness and go beyond it is to better yourself. That's what the first one's intended for this to do. Azeroth is 1000% connected to the first one, so you see that through the first one tech activating to us. We are connected to Azeroth. So Azeroth is basically a first one, or connected to the first one, or a Xerath itself. Part of the Xeroths, alright, is very there. And my final thing is the song must continue. And it is very interesting that we are now doing the Radiant song after... When I was reading the Fareem stuff with the song, I was just like, oh my goodness, the Radiant song. So, yeah. I've done a ton of stuff for this one. This is also one of my longest ones. But, dude, let's get to my questions, though, and finish this out. What are the missing dimensions, right? What else are we putting here? We've seen a few. I've talked about Thros here. Like, what are the missing dimensions? Where do they align? Because with the ones I laid out, Light, Fire, Void, Air Spirit, Christian Dark, and then Untethered, that's 12. So 8 more can fit in between these. You know, and what's that? How many more have been created? Because in the Ethereal book, I actually skipped over it. But they talk about dimensions being able to be artificially created. Okay? So, these can be created too. So you can have little pocket ones pop up. We see all the time. You know? And who are the missing second ones? Who are the missing second ones? And which Void Lord created the old gods? Alright? And, dude, they really made negative energy bad? Is that the final force? Who knows? Alright. This has been long enough. I really gotta go. I can't believe... Oh my goodness, I'm late. So, I definitely gotta go. I really wanted to talk about this. You can't disagree with some of my conclusions. But y'all saw where I get them from. Right? I pull them from these in-game books. And, again, shout out to this add-on. Okay? Keyboard Turner made it. Pretty cool. I like it. Anyways, I'll see y'all next time. Bye-bye.